Hello there, welcome to episode 77 of Right Where You're Sitting Now, edging closer to that big 100. Joining me in the hot seat is the boisterous and upbeat and very chatty in the introduction, Mark Satyr. How are you doing, sir?
Well, I am actually, but I'm very invigorated.
Is that
Deeply invigorated and refreshed. I enjoyed. Me and Occult Ken had a ramble in the Surrey countryside, and we paid our respects at Mother Ludlam's cavern or cove,
cave even.
Or cave,
yeah,
yes. which was very gone.
It was interesting, wasn't it? We go on these little occult field trips, don't we, from time to time, and and check out the folklore of the area when we can. And
it was in a very verdant cranny of Surrey, and it was idyllic though. It couldn't be more idyllic. I mean, it's a very humble site, really. I mean, but it had quite an atmosphere to it, and like I say, purely very. It could be more idyllic, really. Enormous amount. I've never seen so many sort of holly trees on the route in, and there's a stream there. I mean, there's a legend of a wise woman or a witch called Mother Ludlam, and I wonder if she was an actual person or maybe she was the genus Loki or the spring. Who knows? That's me speculating away there, as I want to do at times. And but you can't actually go in these days because there's a fall in the 70s inside the little cave, but there's a very elaborate sort of trellis work which is sort of out the front, which
it's quite nice, isn't it? Yeah.
Adds to the picturesque quaintness of it all.
And it's we've picked up a book called Occult Britain. It's the Hellbore Guide. Hellbore's like a magazine that comes out. I think is it monthly or it's like quarterly maybe, but it's a really good little magazine, or if you want to call it that, or journal. But they've released a book called Occult Britain, and we've been using that as our kind of our inspiration to go to different locations. It's
very
really good.
Superior it is. I'm sure that could be worthy of an episode in and of itself.
Well, if they ever answer their bloody email, it will do, yeah. Anyway, but yeah, you've been in Mother Ludlam's cave for 2 weeks, I think, because we haven't heard you for 2 weeks on the show. So.
Well, I mean, that
the ratings have plummeted, Mark. We had to get you back. No.
Well, yes. Well, it wouldn't be fitting to talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah, people thought I'd locked you in the cave, I think. But anyway, what are we talking about this week?
Well, we're very honoured and very privileged, I believe. We have a very important and distinguished figure to talk to today, and that is Lon Milo Duquette. And he's an excellent spokesman for a very important, august organisation that's influenced occultism in general in people's lives in very interesting ways. He's in particular, what we're focusing on is his anthology, Horror and the Occult, and the crossover and connections between those themes, those sorts of folkloric, mythological, fantastical themes, the conscious, and how they all sort of boil together and spewed out the unconscious mind in this particular form of literature.
Yeah, so I mean, this is, I think, the 6th time we've had Lon on the show, either as a guest or as a contributor to a theme of a show. But it's always a pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to speaking to Lon again. And it's a subject that interests us deeply, isn't it? I mean, horror and the occult, two things that kind of we bonded over, even, you could say. You know?
Yeah, I mean the word. I mean in French, in France, apparently they have this phrase, "fantastic film," the film of the fantastical, which is like an umbrella term for all sorts of different things, from Japanese rubber monster films to sort of the more gothic end of things, and science fiction. And in a way, I think that sort of does it better. I think that it's a much broader church in lots of ways, and they have their roots in literature, in the Gothic literature in particular, but also in folklore and mythology, and which goes back deep into the unconscious, the roots of the unconscious.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, let's get Mr. Duquette on the line. Looking forward to this. It gives me great pleasure to announce our returning guest, Lon Milo Duquette. Thank you so much for coming on the show. How have you been?
I've been well, thank you, and trying to stay well.
Excellent. So how did you, I think we spoke to you last during the pandemic. How did you weather the entire thing? Did you manage to avoid the lurgy, or did you?
Yes, I knock on wood. Constance and I both have taken every precaution we possibly can, and so far so good.
Excellent. That's great news. So we're going to talk to you today about a book that came out, I think, a few years ago, but we didn't actually catch up with you on it, which is Horror and the Occult. So let's go back. Like, when did you talk about like how you first became a fan of the kind of the horror genre?
I was born in Southern California, and in 1948, and growing up by the beach in the early 50s, in some of the it was actually the cutting edge of rock and roll was being literally being born. And it was sort of it was very, very cool place to be a kid, and I was really excited. And television had just started, and we were the first family on the block with a television, and I was so excited. But my mother's relatives lived in Nebraska. And Nebraska is about, 2,000 miles, 1,500 miles west, in the very middle of the continent. And it's about 1,500 years back in time, okay? Well, it was cowboy days, and we'd visit Nebraska. And I was just appalled at the outdoor toilets and the crank telephones, and electricity was new to certain parts of the places, and the primitiveness of it just freaked me out as a little kid when we'd go back for vacations to visit my mom's folks. And I couldn't wait to get back to California and listen to rock and roll or rhythm and blues, we called it in those days. And then I was absolutely shocked when my dad announced that we were going to move to Nebraska. And it was like driving a stake through my heart. I didn't want to go there more than anything, because it was just I don't want to sound unkind about how that rough environment saps the creative life juices out of people's personalities. It's bitter cold in the winter, and it's blazing hot in the summertime, and there is no arts. It's a wasteland, a terrible wasteland. and it just sort of saps all of any virtue of character out of it. Turns people into zombies. Okay, at least that's how I was looking at it from my 7-year-old point of view. But we moved to Nebraska, and I was incredibly depressed. And surrounded by, it was like going back in time, literally. And but it did succeed in allowing me to get in touch with sort of a melancholy ecstasy, if you could call it that. And I was left alone. My dad would go out drilling water wells, and my mom had a job, and I'd be left alone at the house a lot, just sort of staring out the window, and it's so silent, and there's no airplanes flying over, and there's no noise. It's so quiet, and the wind would blow these gossamer curtains, and I would just stare out into space and just almost pray. No, I did. I'd pray to. I didn't believe in Jesus, but I prayed to flying saucer people to just come, take me out of Nebraska, pick me up. You can perform medical experiments on me. Just get me the hell out of Nebraska. And one day, I guess I was 9 years old, I did something unthinkable for a 9-year-old Nebraska boy, alone in the house one sweltering weekday morning. And I found something to read. And so I had to set all that up so you know what my mindset was. I just wasn't looking for a comic book or something like that. And my dad had a set of the greatest hits of literature kind of thing. And I tried to look at the Last of the Mohegans, and that just didn't interest me that much. But then I found Edgar Allan Poe's Tales of Mystery and Imagination. And it had titles like Murder at the Rue Morgue and Mask of the Red Death and Telltale Heart. And I started to read Poe. And for a 9-year-old kid, I was just, one step from being completely illiterate. And about every other sentence, I had to look up words. And some of them are lengthy, quotes in French and Latin and things like that. So I had to read Poe painstakingly slow, with a dictionary and an encyclopedia right at hand too. And that's where I fell in love with the horror genre, because it was spiritually uplifting, more than I've ever been spiritually uplifted before, in sort of masochistic way. But it felt so much like being plucked out of my home in California and moving to Nebraska. It was maddening. And I started sort of to identify with the inner dialogue or the inner monologue of someone going mad. And that's Poe. Okay. That's so Poe. Okay. Because I've been talking to myself just just like that, except without the honey sweet language of Poe to frame the ideas in, and so that's where it began. Then we had a little theater in town, a movie theater, and I saw every film that played at that theater for the next 10 years. Sometimes I'd see them 4 or 5 times in a weekend. Okay. And that was the golden age, let's say 1955 through 1963 or 4. That was the golden age of the black and white B horror films. And I love the gothic horror things, and I love the new sort of atomic post atomic war B movie things and monster movies and things like that. I just became a real horror nerd.
Yeah, I think for me, the thing that gripped me with horror was film first, then literature. I think it just sort of imprints itself on certain people, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't think of it as a spiritual in a spiritual dimension until much later. Actually, I didn't start to seriously put it in that context or interpret it in that context until I was approached by Weiser to curate the book. What's the title? The Book of Horror and
the Occult.
Horror and the Occult. Yes.
I was just going to say, at that early time, and was Poe regarded with the same reverence that he is? Was it proper literature? Was it respectable literature? Or was it, was it regarded, or maybe a bit like a sort of, they use this phrase, don't they, guilty pleasures of the sort of the 50s sort of monster movies? Or was it regarded?
A little bit, but his poetry sort of helped elevate him to a level of literary respectability where, like The Raven, of course, was included in textbooks and things like that at the time, and there was a certain air of respectability, Annabelle Lee, and things like that.
I think also in my lifetime, I mean, a person that was profoundly influenced by Poe. I mean, there were many. Is one of the most notable is who's included in the anthology is H.P. Lovecraft, and in my lifetime, I've seen the shift in the culture. Up in this part of the world, there's Penguin Classics are now producing his works under the classic heading, and they're seen very differently than they were, especially very much so in his lifetime. And there's been a big cultural shift over the years, which has been odd to see. It's been very slow, and also it's literally sent out tentacles in all sorts of different directions.
Yeah, you're getting better when your name turns into an adjective.
Exactly. Yes. Absolutely.
You've made it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also as well, like in terms of like art, I think one of the biggest. It's not so obvious at first, but I think I think it's 1978, 79, that the original Alien film with Geiger's design of the alien, that there's something very Lovecraftian about that, and you might think, oh, how does that really fit? But it's I mean, Lovecraft is an odd one because it's it's got one foot in the sort of gothic. The gothic murkiness of your those castles and sheeted phantoms and skeletons, and then on the other hand he's up in the stars, isn't he? It's like a kind of it's a science fiction, but he's got a very particular take on it.
Yeah, I definitely see. If I was going to, publish or republish an anthology, kind of step by step evolution of appreciation, anyway, of the genre, it would be Poe, uh, Robert W. Chambers, and then Lovecraft, kind of in that order, because that's sort of an evolutionary thing. Chambers was a wild guy, and I've got a couple of Chambers uh, pieces in the book. He was, unlike Poe and Lovecraft to that degree, Chambers actually made a lot of money writing. Okay, and I don't have the years in front of me, but he was sort of he was writing about the future when the future was 1922. So 1880s kind of thing. But anyway, sort of post-Civil War consciousness, and he was imagining an America that had sort of been taken over by imperialistic military government kind of thing, and or at least that's how his character was interpreting things. And but Chambers actually just wrote sort of like soap opera romance novels that just made him filthy rich. But he wrote another series of things on his own, and I think it's what he really loved. Loosely collected stories under the heading "The King in Yellow."
Yeah, I mean that's an excellent. I mean the wonderful thing about that is that in every single each of the stories in that collection, the book "The King in Yellow" turns up, and of course if you read that, you become sort of you're doomed to sort of raving raving insanity, and of course you're sat there reading "The King in Yellow." Which is a wonderful device, and again very reminiscent of the Necronomicon. The concept, there's something of the Necronomicon in that, isn't there?
And it's and the guy was he studied art in Paris, and so the guy was really he treated his language like a fine painting. He painted with his words, and the words are so wonderful. You just wanted to talk like that when you're reading, and so you're completely disarmed as you get deeper and deeper into the story. You're completely disarmed so that you're identifying 100% with his descent into absolute madness. Okay, and the device that The King in Yellow makes everybody who reads it go completely bonkers. And then, like you said, there you are reading it yourself. So it's anyway. He's wonderful character that's not appreciated from the horror point of view.
Yeah, they've never made a film, have they? I mean, they've never made, as far as I'm aware, it's not really translated onto the screen in that respect.
Yeah, well, I'd never even heard of the thing until around I don't know when it was, in the late or late 80s, I guess. Somebody, a filmmaker, emailed me and said he wanted to chat about a project, and he was making a film on the King in Yellow, and uh, he more or less assumed that I already knew what it was about and stuff like that. And so that's what got me looking it up, and getting into it. And he, because he wanted to know if I could, if I'd be willing to play a cameo or appear in a cameo of the King in Yellow. And I'll be a cameo in anybody's anything. But nothing ever came of it. But that got me going. And once I discovered more about Robert W. Chambers, the more I said, God, where's this guy been all my life?
It reminds me a bit of the way I discovered Philip K. Dick, strangely. He was another one of these characters that he was sort of relegated to the kind of pulp world, wasn't he, for a long time? And then I assume after Blade Runner started to become more of a name. And then again, in my lifetime, I've seen him go from, being a kind of a looked down upon sci-fi type of writer, and up to now he's considered much more of a classic, writer. I see his books often collected in anthologies and in nice bookshops and stuff these days, whereas I used to have to collect them. I used to have to try and track down old 70s copies of his books and 60s copies. So why do you think that certain writers sort of find their popularity so many years after their demise, do you think?
Well, it's artists are the prophets. Okay. If you want to get an idea of where human consciousness is heading, look to the artists, look to the music. I think it was Plato that said, when the mode of the music changes, the walls of the cities shake. And the Fugs, remember the Village Fugs? The band?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
You young people.
Yeah.
No, it's Lost on Me. That's a cultural reference point. Lost on Me.
I've not heard of them either.
Yeah, the Fugs, Fuggs, I think, the Village Fugs. They hung out around with Harry Smith, and I think Harry Smith actually produced their first couple albums, and Allen Ginsberg and New York beat generation melding into hippiedom. Great. My favorite song is Ramses II is Dead. They were too obscene for top 40, but they were the hippie underground gods. So my favorite album is It Crawled Into My Hand, Honest.
Good song titles, definitely, and good titles generally.
Yeah. But anyway, I don't know how we got off on the Fugs.
That is a thread for us to pursue. Which I'm always grateful for. I mean, do you think that the King in Yellow will ever be found on the screen? I mean, that wraparound. Just talking about that wraparound, that framing device in the story in the book itself. It seems there's some sort of link there in my head between those and those. The sort of Amicus 70s anthology films, because I know that the people who made those were huge fans of those sort of horror anthologies, and I wonder if it ever will be found. You could, there could be a story there in itself of somebody trying to make a film about the King, and they end up becoming insane and then entering a whirlpool of madness and insanity as a result. So there we are. There's a plot there for somebody.
I'm taking notes.
Those Hollywood moguls, they're around.
Yes, go on.
So
other ideas about
Let's talk a little bit about.
Absolutely. And if you read it, there truly isn't a king in yellow thread that goes between this series of almost vignette stories. You can't put a logical, oh, this is why this one is called the King of Yellow, and this is why the King in Yellow, and this is why the King in Yellow poem appears in this one, and stuff. It'd be perfect for sort of shortcuts type film, an anthology,
A portmanteau. Yeah, that's that sort of thing. Let's talk a bit about the occult. One thing that's always kind of interested me is, and I think this is often the a point of disappointment for people when they join magical orders, is why do you feel the horror and the occult kind of intersect so well?
Fear.
That it? I think also, I mean, I've said this, the unconscious. I mean, it's fascinating when you give your account as a very sensitive, very sensitive souled 9-year-old reading Poe, because Poe he sounds the depths of psychology. He's a psychological. I mean, the whole Telltale Heart narrative is all about a psychology, but a very kind of. I mean, it's a fascinating story. One reason why it worked so well and when it broke ground is because you are reading about a murderer who murders an old man for no apparent reason, no logical reason, and in the narrative you identify with the murderer. You're not there to solve it. You identify with it, and so and there's similar things in those other stories. And there's a very, very dark. There's a very dark psychology there, which I'm probably. You probably don't get until you're much older.
Yeah, especially in the Osirian, the Christian era, where we've been, at least in Western civilization, has been totally encouraged or discouraged from recognizing the dark side, our dark side of our nature, which is, from a magical point of view, is just perfectly natural and wholesome, and you're not a healthy person unless you've got a good recognition and of the kind of the flip side of your nature, and we've been told to fear it like a devil, actually fear it as the devil, and so but we've all got it, okay, and so in the same way that I think children are almost naturally attracted to dinosaurs. Okay, the thought of dinosaurs, and the more terrifying the dinosaur, the more kids love them. Okay, that's because their dinosaurs can't hurt you, but they honor what you fear. They turn it into sort of a god. The gods of the dinosaurs, the monster gods, and the reason that kids love them and memorize their names in the same way as they memorize little mantras and little spells, Tyrannosaurus Rex, Diplodocus. Horror does that to us too. When we read a book, we can put the book down. When we leave the movie, we can go get some popcorn, but it's there. and we identify with it because it is us. And the fear of the unknown, fear of our own unknown. We're afraid to know ourselves. And that's why in initiation ceremonies, from indigenous people's initiation ceremonies to the most highbrow Queen Street Freemasons, fear is very important. Every initiation starts with you getting scared and overcoming fear, scared and overcoming fear, scared, and then the inner guardian scares you, the Hiereus scares you, and then another officer says, "Oh, lighten up. He's okay. I'm his, I'll vouch for him. He's fine." But you get scared. Fear, overcoming fear. That's the mechanism of evolution.
Do you think part of why that kind of intersection happens as well, it might be because, but by its very nature, like the occult is hidden, isn't it? It's a hidden sort of thing that could be around any corner, technically. Do you think that makes for a good kind of horror fodder? Do you think that might be one of the reasons it's kind of, it's so often portrayed in the horror genre?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think whether knowingly or unknowingly, Aleister Crowley picked up on that. If you're going to take me seriously, I'm going to have to scare the shit out of you. And you're going to have to deal with that. You're going to have to overcome that. Eventually, you'll probably see what I tried to scare what you were afraid of was exactly what you needed to overcome. Crowley just delighted in freaking out the freak-outable. And if you are so immature or so unwilling to face that side of yourself or that depth of yourself, I don't want you anyway, so I'll be happy to scare you away. I was. Are you watching any of the HBO or Netflix series, The Sandman?
Oh no, that's just started, hasn't it? Or it just came out. I need to actually watch that. I haven't seen it yet.
Well, I'm enjoying it. Okay, but it's almost. I'm not saying I've discovered any great. Anyway, I'm enjoying it. I'm watching it, but just offhand, in one scene, they're talking about the evil activities of one of the noble characters in it, and said, yes, and in the 30s he was a disciple of Aleister Crowley. And that's all you hear. Crowley doesn't appear in it or anything. Just the name is a boogeyman.
Yeah, the end of the pier, Demon King appears up through the trap door, doesn't he, in a cloud of sulfur. So it's very much like that, and also like that, those themes of self-overcoming and initiation, as sort of Nietzsche would refer to it, and also the shadow. I mean, that brings us totally again to the psychological aspects of the relationship with ourselves, doesn't it? And Crowley actually he appears in in these modern examples, but coming back to this book as well, in Casting the Runes, Dr. Carswell is very loosely based on a Crowley-esque sort of figure.
Well, he's absolutely perfect, and I think he would just get a big kick out of knowing that he was playing that archetypal role in 21st century literature. I think.
Yeah, I mean,
no end.
Yeah, I mean, Casting the Runes that was written in 1911. So he could have been well aware of it, and I don't think it was actually strange. I don't remember him referring to it in any way. But also as well, I mean, you were saying about the influence of the big screen, the silver screen, and the translation into the big screen of these sort of narratives. But also, I mean, I defy anyone to say to say otherwise. But the best film of its kind, from the 1950s, 1958, in fact, was as you would know it, Mr. Duquette, Curse of the Demon, but as we know it, the Night of the Demon, which is based on that on that short story, elaborated for a very modern age, because instead of what it has, it does still follow those sort of psychological films actually, because it's got, instead of the kind of spiritual good and evil, although that's in there as well, it's more about the rational and the irrational, and the fear of the irrational and the irrational age, the Apollyon age of order and science and respectability, no doubt, and then this very sort of visceral underbelly of the sort of dark irrational, so parts of the self and of the world actually.
Well, I was really lucky because I got into all of this. I was just sort of a wild, anti-war, folk singing hippie, and I wasn't a very serious scholar or not even a student. I only went to college to score LSD, and so here I am trying to get into like Eastern mysticism and things like that, because of I was lucky enough to have an extraordinarily profound series of psychedelic experiences that just sort of snapped me into, oh boy, there's big stuff out there. I want to find out more about myself. But I was really lucky that when I started to run across Crowley with an early edition of the Thoth Tarot, and where I first seriously heard the name Aleister Crowley, I looked it up in my occult dictionary, and it says famous Scottish Satanist.
Yes, I've seen that. I've come across that. I was thinking, well, that's superb, because it's wrong on every front, isn't it?
It's wrong on every front.
No, actually, I remember now. What it actually says is famous Scottish Satanist who believed he was a reincarnation of Dr. D. Even that's wrong, because he believed he was a reincarnation of Edward Kelly. So it's wrong on 3 counts.
Yeah. But anyway, and as far as Satanism was going, I'm still working off of things like Rosemary's Baby, and I'm still fresh out of just getting rid of the born again Christian duality upbringing and stuff, and I'm happy to be heretical, but I sure didn't want to be satanic, not knowing that the satanic thing that I was afraid of didn't exist the way I thought of it. Anyway, and I was just so lucky to be able to talk with people that knew Crowley and ask them questions, okay, regarding, was happy to tell me that he didn't kill 120 babies that year, and he didn't eat babies. No, that was, and then explain to me what that was about, and without pulling the bad boyness out of it, I was allowed with, Grady could tell me, no. That's true, but it's not true like that. Like the baby eating thing one year, or well, he wasn't lying when he said that, but here's what he was saying. And I go, oh my God, the guy is brilliant. He's funny. He's just indiscreet. That's all. Yeah.
I think that's what I meant earlier when I was saying that, when people join magic orders, they often get a slight sense of disappointment. I think it's because of the way this stuff's been so kind of sexed up, as it were, in examples like you gave earlier. I think a lot of people join, say, like the OTO or, Golden Dawn or whatever, expecting it to be all kind of bosoms and blood because they've been watching Hammer horror films, or, they've been watching this kind of this version of what people, I guess, think the occult might be. And when they actually encounter it, they think, oh, actually, it's not that thing.
Now, you gotta bring your own bosoms and blood to the table. Nobody's going to get you a girlfriend or a boyfriend. And as a matter of fact, you're going to have to go out on your own and develop charm.
Yeah, that might be an episode title, I think, Bosoms and Blood, but for this one, it might be quite a good one.
But also, people seek initiation, if they know it or not, for self-knowledge. And if you're doing the work, if you're seriously doing the work, if you're a bit of a what shall I say? If your motivations are superficial, then it's really going to expose those, and you'll go off and do something else. So if you're actually doing the work, that's a different matter altogether. And then that doesn't outlaw the two things. Don't have there's no conflict of interest between bosoms and actually being a serious occultist. That's I'd say reconciling those two things is probably one of the most important parts of the great work.
And your expression of the art form of your understanding of the magic can just be as exciting and as titillating as you can bring to the table, but it's not part of an organization's. You don't learn it. The Boy Scouts doesn't teach it, so that a lot of people are disappointed when they think, even in the back of their mind, that that's what it might be. But there's a certain amount of advantage to that disappointment. Because when I stepped on a bus at midnight in Santa Ana, California, to drive all night up to Dublin, California, to take my OTO Minerval initiation in the garage of two people whose names I did not know, whose real names I did not know, who only gave me a motel address to have the bus drop me off at, I started to have my doubts about whether the blood and bosoms, if I was going to be the blood and the bosoms were going to be old former scarlet women of Crowley with dyed red hair and saggy breasts, and men leaping about in goat leggings. And so I started to have my doubts in that 8-hour drive. I had to think about, wow, what if everything they said about Crowley was true? My wife doesn't even know the address of where I'm going. She doesn't even have the phone number of where I'm going. I could disappear off the face of the earth, and she wouldn't even know where it was that I went. And that fear was so important. That's when my initiation started. My initiation started on an 8-hour bus ride through the night across the abyss of California's Central Valley. And if you've ever been stuck on the I-5 freeway at night, it's the abyss. It's hell. Okay. And on a bus where you have to actually stop someplace to pee, it really is hell. But I realized that finally when I met Phyllis and Grady, I was so relieved, and it was such a wonderful wonderful relief. It literally was passing through a mini abyss, and every initiation, every step you take along the initiation path is a mini abyss crossing similar to this. And to live through each of these horror stories and be allowed to process it in other ways is also little initiations. And it, to me, it is a direct thread reaching through the horror genre into the occult initiatory spiritual evolution process.
Absolutely. Every step is a birth and a death, and as long as you've got air in your body, you are on that. You're still on that journey of initiation, and it's an ongoing path, isn't it?
Yeah.
And in the anthology, coming back to that, we were talking about the sort of Crowley and the sort of being the sort of the presenting the mini image to the world of this sort of archetypal, what most people would regard as a black magician. In interesting contrast to that, and it's a contrast because she was a contemporary as Dion Fortune, who's also included, isn't she? The sealer, Mr. Maquette is that's included in the anthology. I think originally it's from The Secrets of Dr. Taverner, which is like an anthology in itself, 1926, which is, and Dr. Taverner, he's like an occult detective, and he's loosely based on her own mentor, who called himself Dr. I say that again, Dr. Moriarty, I understand. So that's that's about an undine, isn't it? It's a sort of,
yeah.
Yes, it's about these sort of elemental forces.
One of the things that super attracted me when I started to learn more about the Golden Dawn, the original Golden Dawn, was the fact that it was in this, I guess, late Victorian, Edwardian, Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson-esque London. I could. It was easy for me to put the activities and the clothes and the basic milieu of Crowley's Golden Dawn, because I was already so familiar with it because of the Sherlock Holmes thing. Even Sherlock Holmes has suggestions of supernatural. The Hounds of the
Baskervilles, Hound of the Baskervilles.
Yeah, you don't know whether that's a monster of some kind, I just love that genre. So it's easy for me to see MacGregor Mathers and Moynia tinkering away at the Horniman Museum at night. And
Gaslight London, or Gaslit London, as they.
Yes.
Yeah. And
yes.
Conan Doyle, of course, is included in the anthology, isn't it? With the Ring of Thoth, excellent Ring of Thoth. I must say, I've read that not that long ago, and it's written in the 1890s, and also one of the things that really struck me about, he wrote 2 mummy stories. I didn't realise that Conan Doyle sort of invented the mummy as a horror fiction of the mummy as we understand it, and the Ring of Thoth is very influential on the Boris Karloff
Yeah.
version of the Mummy film.
Oxenorman.
Yes, that's and he's a very urbane. He's a very urbane mummy, and he's like a sophisticated sort of man of the world, and he and also has the immortality. It's not a blessing; it's a curse in that case. But the other one, but what's even more intriguing is the other version of the mummy story he did was called Lot Number. It's the name of a number. Lot Number 124 or something. It's called 1249. Actually, I tell a lie. I mean, the mummy in that is very different. I mean, it's a sort of a sinewy black thing that leaps out of. I mean, it's an instrument of destruction. It's very much like the it's not the Boris Karloff version of the mummy. It's the mummy's ghost version of the mummy. You know, which sort of shambles after you and then strangles you. It's very much that. It's a black sinewy thing that jumps out of trees and grots you and drowns you and does all sorts of things. But he doesn't talk. And there's also in that version of the story, there's also like the scroll of life, of course, which ends up in the Universal films.
Is that the scroll of Thoth?
Yes. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. The scroll of Thoth. Yeah. I think it. Is it called the Scroll of Life? Yes, or maybe they got it both things. But yes, you're right. I'm sure you're right. But it brings the mummy to life. And there's also in the universe. I'm sure you remember in the Universal horror films, it's the Scroll of Thoth, and also 9 tanner leaves during the full moon.
9 tanner leaves gives him movement.
That's right.
Well, give him life.
That's right. And
indestructible.
That's right. The more you give him, the more animated it becomes. And they even in the little short story, there's at the end of it, the mummy and everything is like destroyed in a fire, and there's like these leaves which aren't really elaborated on, but they're like preserved leaves. So there's even a suggestion in the story, only a flavour of it, of the 9 tanner leaves during the full moon, which inevitably somebody wearing a fez is responsible of feeding the unfortunate mummy.
I'm sure that somebody's tried to get those tanner leaves and smoke them.
Well, yes. Well, I think they're supposed to be an extinct something
probably
going on,
so.
aren't they? An extinct line of some sort of shrub or herb from the ancient Egypt.
Now, Bram Stoker is another one. There's a Bram Stoker story, I believe, in the book also. But now there's no proof. Okay, there's no evidence that Bram Stoker was a member of the Golden Dawn, at least as far as I know. Do you know anything?
There was rumors, but I don't. No, it doesn't. That doesn't seem. No, I don't know why. Yeah, no, I think that's been sort of exploded, isn't it? It's not.
Yeah, I actually I think you'd be hard pressed to find evidence. But I've written a screenplay for with a Crowley. Crowley is during the breakup of the Golden Dawn, that era in Crowley's life. So the characters in the movie include Yeats and Maud Gonne and Florence Farr and Mathers and Moynihan and everybody. So, but I've also inserted Bram Stoker in my fiction, and sort of almost as a comic relief. And toward the end, he destroys all of the records of his membership.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Stoker did know. I mean, he was friends with Oscar Wilde, and he was one of the very few people who went to see him during his disgrace. And Oscar Wilde's wife, Constance Wilde, she was a member of the Golden Dawn.
she's in my story too.
Well, so there is a
And
connection.
it's not beyond the. He certainly had tea with all of these people, and so uh, not only that, but probably influenced uh, by the activities going on, the esoteric activities of that late 1800s theosophical golden dawnish kind of movement that was going on. And have you? I haven't heard that Crowley ever met Bram Stoker, but something in the back of my mind.
The Dracula is on the. He's a recommended book, isn't it? He recommended
Yeah.
that amongst the thing, and yeah. I mean, obviously, Constant Wild was being a member of the Golden Dawn. She may not have broken any oaths directly, but she certainly. I'm sure that I can't imagine if she crossed paths with Bram Stoker, which is very likely. Considering his friendship with Wilde, that they didn't discuss those kind of esoteric or occult themes. I mean, that seems unthinkable.
About how small a world it was. We the people that hung out with each other at that time was a relatively small circle of people. So it's not like there were thousands of Golden Dawn members and thousands of Irish poets and writers at the time. So, plus, Crowley went to Père Lachaise and cemetery and chiseled off the plaque that was obscuring the penis on Oscar Wilde's Angel's tomb, or Tomb's Angel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it was a brass butterfly, wasn't it? And didn't he wear it as a codpiece?
And I'm positive that Constance Wilde would have gotten a huge, huge kick out of him doing that.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit, because I mean, one of the definitely this is one of the stranger authors in a way, because he's a great horror writer, but he also influenced the occult, and that doesn't happen very often. Let's talk a little bit about H.P. Lovecraft. Like, how did you come about? How did you sort of first get into Lovecraft? He's such a he seems so connected to the occult through people like Kenneth Grant, obviously, and it'd be great to sort of get your take on all of that.
Well, I confess that of all of the major figures that I did not come to H.P. Lovecraft early in my studies. I just didn't. It's like, oh gee, do I have room in my brain for another great like this? But I was I came to H.P. Lovecraft indirectly, because you can't avoid bumping into him. And I think the thing that I read earliest was the Dunwich Horror. And my brother Mark, my late brother Mark, which makes it even more spooky now that I think of it, would read little sections of Lovecraft that he was reading, where everything was unspeakable. Everything was ghastly, grotesque, unspeakably pain, and exaggerated statements like that made Lovecraft, in my mind, a certain caricature. So I wish I could say that I was as expertly educated in Lovecraft as most people are, but I'm not.
A phrase that I often associate with Lovecraft is that in one, I can't remember where he writes it, but he talks about the main character feeling a sense of overwhelming dread, as if bat-winged hippogriffs looked on through transcosmic gulfs. And I was thinking, well, there's no other writer really you could come up with that. I mean, you know, it's sort of Charles Dickens and, you know, of the Brontes could never, you know, that wouldn't do for them at all. It's a very distinct. It's a very distinct. It's a very bizarre image. It's a sort of this gargoyle-like image he sort of plants in your head as well. He's very good at that. He's very good at that, and I think, yeah, like I say, he's a very distinct writer. He's sort of coming into his own now, and his influence is sort of a good, it bears witness to him, I think, really well, in a way which he completely didn't. I mean, he had a very humble attitude to his own work and regarded it as not, you know, significant at all. He absolutely adored Poe. He looked up to Poe in this sort of wonderful way, but yeah, and you can, but that in itself is a bit. It's sort of a bit surprising in some ways, because there's a great, you know, it's a sort of psychologically led Poe, and Lovecraft is sort of somewhere else altogether, isn't he? He sort of, in a way, Lovecraft sort of is very difficult to define. I think this is one of the reasons why he's so potent, is that he sort of falls between these sorts of, you know, he's very difficult to pin down and say, well, is it exactly this one thing or another? Because in a way, he's, like I said earlier, he's very much a science fiction writer.
Well, he's definitely the occult, almost direct link through his recurring theme of the Necronomicon, and the existence of this terribly dangerous book. And so the spawning of modern versions of the Necronomicon, which we see all over the place, starting in the mid-70s, complete with sigils and invocations and things like that, that for the most part are pretty convincing as a version of what the Necronomicon actually might be. Of course, I didn't, well, let me back up. I was speaking at Cal State Fullerton to the modern religions class, and afterwards a student came up and it was introduced by the Dr. Santucci, whose class I was speaking at, and Santucci introduced him and said that his paper, I think it was his master's thesis, was on the Necronomicon. And I go, oh, how interesting that is, you know. I said, you know, yeah, I know one of the guys that threw that together. and I've never seen anybody so curiously heartbroken in my life. And so I didn't want, because I guess the paper was really good. And I'm saying, and I told him what I'm telling you right now, that as a workable grimoire, it's great. It's perfect. Okay, it's nice. It's brilliant. And I had to remind him that everybody's grimoire was somebody's made up Necronomicon. The Key of Solomon, all the keys of Solomon was one or a collection of magicians' things that real life people made it up or developed it or brought it through in the same way that all sorts of sacred texts are brought through. So I said, I don't want to step on your, but please don't treat this as a historic that you've got the mad Arabs photocopy here. So.
And also in terms of like literature, the Necronomicon. I mean, other people, just as like Lovecraft's had to, had that you had got the Lovecraft Circle. They wrote about the Necronomicon, and it also turns up in films and in films long after. In the
Sure.
I've forgotten what it's called now. The Evil Dead. There's a reference to the Necronomicon. I mean, the Necronomicon, The Evil Dead wasn't written by Lovecraft, was it? I mean, but it's become this archetypal thing. Archetypal being the key word here. I think all these things, they draw deeply on that. We're back with, like you were saying about sitting and watching those films in the 50s. I mean, but, that draws back to the tribe in the cave around the fire, with the shaman and the storyteller telling about the gods and monsters, and where here we are in the world of gods and monsters. It's something profoundly archetypal.
Yeah.
And that's why Lovecraft, I think, is endured, and that's why I think Poe's endured, and I think this is why these things are still with us, is because of they touch something deeply archetypal in us.
I did wonder, like, what you obviously we had Michael Staley on recently, and we did a show about Kenneth Grant and the Typhonian Order and etc. I was wondering what is your view on kind of using, I guess, fictional tropes to kind of inform magical practice? Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I think the fictional characters are just as alive as non-fictional characters. Okay, if a human could conceive of them, a human has created them, and they're real. They're just as real. So I'm all for it. One of my early experiences with observing a Goetic evocation, or the technique of Solomonic magic, was a student of Poke Runyon, or Carol Poke Runyon, and they operate with a magic mirror, and an operator and a receiver, and they do a classic Solomonic whipping a spirit into a triangle kind of thing, and just by the book, Lesser Key of Solomon. Only the magician stands behind the person that is receiving the vision, and it was remarkable. It's awesome, as a matter of fact, and it's so easy to actually see a spirit appear in visible form within the mirror, a black mirror triangle, and so we did that for a few weeks, and everybody had a chance to sit in the driver's seat and whip up Goetic spirit and send it on its way. And then around Christmas time, the student of folks that was doing this, I won't share his name because I don't know if he'd want that, but he said, "Let's do Santa Claus." And I thought, oh, gee, what do you, okay. And he said, oh, and it whipped up Santa Claus. It was absolutely just as stunning as when you whipped up Andromalius. And he says, I've whipped up Bilbo. I've whipped up Gandalf. Who else did he say he's whipped up? These things are archetypal characters. Mythological characters are realer than historic characters. They're much more real. They're much more alive. They're much more deeply impressed in every nerve of our being. And so it's not without, it's completely possible. As a matter of fact, any spirit that we think that we're whipping up is in one form or another a fictional character unique to ourselves. So I'm all for that. Okay, you could do Star Wars character, you could do Star Trek characters you could do the Hobbit. If they're real to you, if those archetypal characters are real to you, they're alive to you, and they can be evoked, conversed with, sent on errands, asked for information, just like the more artificial medieval, agares or Payaman. And if you want to enrich your understanding of the mythology of these characters, there's plenty of information out there that you can look to see who their bosses were, by tradition, who rules them, what times of day or year that is appropriate, or what planet configurations are best to. You can fill in the details all you want, but ultimately every character that you're dealing with is sort of a fictional character.
That's a good way of looking at it. So obviously I'm mindful of how long we've had you on the line. So I guess one last thing is
I'm 74 years old. The man's got to pee.
So just let us know what have you got coming up next. Like, do you have any more books on the way, or any more albums?
Yes, I've redone my novel. Speaking of fictitious characters, The Accidental Christ, or an Accidental Christ, and expanded it, added much more characters. A lot. It's something that I wrote 30 years ago, and that never got properly published. But that's coming out on St. John's Day, 2023, coming up, and I've just finished up on that one. And the book-wise, there's not a new book on the front burner at the moment, because I'm doing another series of Chinese workshops that are like 3 hours each, and 12 of them, and they have to be translated and things like that. So I'm very, very busy with that. And every day at 10 o'clock my time, since the pandemic began, so it's almost 2 years. Well, it is 2 years now. Every morning at 10 a.m., I do a live broadcast on Facebook, and then it's almost immediately turned to a YouTube, reposted on YouTube. So you can tune in to my ramblings every morning at 10 o'clock.
That's great.
And,
excellent. Well, thank you so much. I mean, you're definitely one of our, favorite recurring guests on the show, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Lon. So thank you so much for some more of your valuable time.
It was an
Oh,
absolute. It was an absolute. I must say this. It was an absolute delight. Thank you for your work, Mr. Duquette. It was. I feel. That meant a lot to me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, guys.
And we are back. Lon's always great. I just love having Lon on the show. He's he's a character, but he's also a legend, I would say, within the occult world. So it's always an honor, and it's always great fun. He's a fun, he's a very approachable occult writer, isn't he? I mean, there are some very very dry or very witless or very not to say that their work's bad, but Lon's he's a kind of a mixture of both, in my opinion. He's a really good writer, but he's also a really good personality. I think that's
and doer. He's he's not. He doesn't shy from the nitty gritty. There's a whole life. There's a whole life of nitty gritty where Lon Milo Duquette's concerned, in the best possible sense of the word. I mean that in the very best, in the most exalted sense of the word. Yeah, I mean there's real work there, and as well, and you can see that in his best work. I mean, for me, you've got Knocking Vision Magick, which is like
his magnum opus, really, isn't it?
It's a very important work. I mean, he's got his most recent, most significant work, his biography, My Life with the Spirits.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
And what was originally called The Magick of the Lima, later became Magick of Aleister Crowley, made that particular path, very accessible and approachable, and for many people. Yeah.
And what did you feel you touched upon enough?
Well, it's always the way, isn't it? I mean, it's always the way. I mean, it's in a good way. It's always good to be wanting more, and there's things we could have explored further, but we're constrained by time, and hopefully, anyways, not for me to judge. Let a very discerning audience, hopefully, where you're listening to this post, and you'll be led to want to go to the source. Go to read the source and be introduced, either return to that or be introduced to new writers, new ideas.
Yeah, the book Horror and the Occult, it's published by Wiser, and it's still very much available on Amazon and all your other favourite bookstores. It's a nice little volume, actually. I quite like it. It's got a very lurid cover. We like a lurid cover, don't we?
I live for lurid covers. I mean, I'm so fussy about it. I will only read certain books if they have particularly lurid covers. I mean, they in the 70s they produced Dion Fortune's series of books, Goatfoot God, Sea Priestess, Moon Magic, The Winged Ball, etc. I mean, apparently they're being very heavily edited in those editions. So which I've only just relatively realised, but I'm sure that with those intensely lurid covers, I've enjoyed them more. The worth of the cover alone. I mean, you can get so much from the cover.
Yeah.
I mean, but
I'm sure that helped Dennis Wheatley's book sell, for God's sake. But yeah.
Well, they also present lots of quite key occult ideas in a very digestible and agreeable way.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway, we at the time of recording, we are 17 subscribers away from 1,000 on YouTube. So will you be one of those 17? Will you finally shut me up and get us over the 1,000 line? I don't even know why I care about it so much. It's just become a target. It's become a target that I need to reach now. So 17 people. We have many listeners. 17 of you. Go to Sit In Now, one word, on YouTube, and just click subscribe. You can, you don't have to do anything. It's, it doesn't cost anything. It's free. But if you want to, I've been enjoying talking to our listeners on Instagram at Sit In Now. Instagram seems to be the best way of getting in contact with us. We used to run a Facebook page, but I don't understand how the mechanics of the group works, and how it works as a functional thing. So I don't really use the Facebook group, but Instagram's a very good one. Twitter as well, I'm on there as well, at Sitting Now. So yeah, get in touch. We like talking to people. We like recommendations. We like feedback. Even if you hated it, just let us know. But anyway,
Well, if you hated Ken.
well, yeah.
If you hated Ken, I mean, I do. I mean,
he comes here, you know. Yeah, I see how it is. Okay, anyway, on that bombshell, I'll see you guys next week. I believe we are back with Richard Gavin, I think. But yeah, we'll see. Anyway, I'll see you all next week.
Thank you.